Donald Trump's war of choice with Iran and the energy crisis that it has caused is destroying American businesses. And that America First corporate graveyard is the subject of tonight's prime time focus. In the middle of this wartime energy crunch, the Trump administration is actually paying some American companies and other companies not to build energy. Yes, really, almost $2 billion taxpayer dollars being handed to developers in exchange for shutting down offshore wind projects. Wind that would have powered 4 million American homes. Some of those companies got paid to cancel projects they hadn't even started building. As one report put it, the government is paying Total Energies to halt a wind farm it isn't constructing in exchange for fossil fuel investments Total Energies was already going to make anyway. Although, we should note, the government argues this payout is a reimbursement from initial fees. But the list of corporate casualties is getting hard to keep track of. Spirit Airlines, gone. QVC, bankrupt. Jo-Ann Fabrics, completely liquidated. American Farm bankruptcies up 46% last year. Manufacturing, 80,000 jobs fewer today than the day Trump took office. And in the kind of twist you almost couldn't make up, Whirlpool, the company that Donald Trump personally celebrated as the breakout success of his first-term tariffs, told investors this week that the Iran war has caused, quote, recession-level industry decline right here in the U.S. That was the original tariff winner, now warning of recession.
American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream.
Trump promised a manufacturing renaissance. He promised farmers prosperity. He promised cheaper energy. Instead, his tariffs raised costs, and his war with Iran sent diesel and fertilizer prices soaring. There is an economic serial killer on the loose. He says he's working for you. The graveyard tells a different story. Joining us now to discuss is Tim O'Brien, Senior Executive Editor of Bloomberg Opinion and an MS Now political analyst, and Natasha Soren, Professor at Yale Law School and President of the Budget Lab at Yale. So, Tim, I want to start with you. I feel like we talk a lot on our show about how the president has weaponized the government to punish companies he doesn't like. Law firms, colleges, media companies, things like that. I feel like we don't talk enough about the companies that Trump destroys by accident because he kind of doesn't understand how his policies work.
And we're in the very early stages of, I think the impact the Iran war is going to have. And I think we're just starting to see some of the cracks due to escalating oil prices and depleting inventories. So any of the casualties you're seeing now, I think we're first inning. The reason the stock market has been soaring is that corporate profits have been good. And I think across most of corporate America right now, most CEOs have had fairly rosy projections about what their profitability will be through the rest of the year. But the restraining force on all that are human beings. Consumer spending is 66% of GDP growth. When consumers don't have money in their pockets and can't spend, there's a discernible economic impact from that. And so the gas prices we're seeing right now could get and may likely get worse certainly if we don't get the Strait of Hormuz reopened again soon. The tariffs still have this sort of looming effect over everything. And the Iran war and the tariffs are both epic self-owns by Donald Trump. He is not numerate. I've sat in his office. He's in real estate, and he doesn't know what net present value is. He's not familiar with cash flow. He's filed 6 corporate bankruptcies. He almost went personally bankrupt once. He has just been insulated from the realities of the world by his own wealth his entire life. And so how average people live and breathe, and how the corporations who depend on a sound, functioning federal government that regulates with rationality, that pursues policies with rationality, are now in the crosshairs.
So, Natasha, Tim mentioned the stock market, and there's another part to this, which is the jobs reports that came out. And I think the administration was quick to point to both of these this week as being indicators of a strong economy, and that, and we hear the talking points from other officials that once the Iran war is over, gas prices will drop, and things are already starting to look a little bit rosy. How do you square that with what everyday Americans are feeling and hearing? How do the numbers tell a story that is slightly different than what people experience?
You know, I agree with some of what Tim is saying about being in relatively early innings. And in part, you see a job market that is holding up quite well. The jobs number was around 144,000, way above expectations on Friday. You also see a stock market that is doing quite well, and a lot of corporations reporting that they expect to continue to see earnings growth over the course of the next many quarters. But the challenge is, and what I want your viewers to kind of understand, is the stock market shouldn't be understood as being able to internalize for us and tell us about risks that are on the horizon in real time. If you go back to now what feels like ancient history, but in 1987, we had periods where it looked like valuations were high. It looked like we were on the edge of a bubble, but the stock market kept going up, up, and up until all of a sudden on one day it lost 20% of its value at once. And so we know what the implications of a lot of these types of policy errors are. We know that when you do things like have trade wars against allies and adversaries alike, when you have a war that has raised energy prices, this administration wanted to see gas prices under $2 a gallon. Now you have analysts saying they might well be $5. We know what the consequences are for inflation, and we know what the consequences are for uncertainty with respect to how the economy functions and not knowing what the next twist and turn is from this administration's perspective. And what I think you're seeing so far in those numbers, Eamon, is something we think about a lot as we're thinking about this administration's policies, which is that in some sense, they inherited an economy that was quite strong, and an economy that is likely to see massive productivity gains from AI that is going to be disruptive, but is going to be transformational and already is. And instead of kind of riding an economy that was doing well, we have made a lot of choices, and those choices are hugely detrimental to American economic security.
All of this has ended up being a really interesting, live case study in consumer psychology as well, because our colleague Alex Tabbitt has been out, at one gas pump to another, talking to Americans all over the place. And, often you hear a lot of what I think you would expect, which is people saying that they're in a lot of pain. They're feeling like they're barely able to save. They're worried about their children. They're thinking about having to go out to get another job, and they don't know how that is going to go for them. But then you occasionally see him come across people who are living in some kind of Trump bubble. And I want you to take a listen to one of the conversations he had with a Donald Trump supporter.
How do you feel about your vote for President Trump right now, given these gas prices, given the fact that this war is continuing?
It's got to get bad before it gets good. So he's trying to fix it. Got to give the man some time.
Is there anything that he could do or say that would make you lose your support for him?
No, there's nothing he can do or say to make me lose the support for him. I believe in him 100%. He's a good man.
So, Tim, he just believes in him 100%. He thinks that it's got to get bad before it gets good. Is that how things work?
That's actually a Trump line. I think Bessent has said something to that effect. Howard Lutnick has, I think, in reference to Iran, that this is worth the pain for everyone. I think that Trump voter is probably a cultist. And Donald Trump has a big, vast, not vast, but a significant part of the electorate that he can do no wrong. And that's the culty part of where the MAGA voter is. He's not going to, the GOP can't keep surfing on MAGA voters. There's been a huge growth in independence, and there's a huge reason that shift is happening, and it's because of the economy. It's because the reality of what Trump's doing is coming home to roost for voters. That's why the GOP's in trouble going into the midterms. And I think for the Trump voters who don't want to say he's let me down, and I'm going to change my vote, or I'm going to change my party, or I'm just not going to vote at all, they're of a different ilk, and I think they've bought into the idea that he's infallible.
Well, and they see the alternative as a worse option than Trump, who they are stuck with for the indefinite future. Natasha, what I want to ask you is about this summit in Beijing, because it does touch on AI. On many levels, it's a trade war, tariffs, but Trump is going to take CEOs of Boeing. He's taking the CEO of Apple. He's also taking the CEO of NVIDIA. And it really is such a change in policy from the Biden administration when it comes to chips. And so what do you expect to see from this summit with Xi?
You know, it's hard to predict what we are likely to see, in part because the contours of the discussion are shifting in relatively real time. Just a few days ago, we had another trade court ruling against the Trump administration's tariffs that they're levying and the Section 122 authority that they're using to levy tariffs against China. And so part of the challenge, I feel like, from a negotiating perspective is exactly what are the rules of the road with respect to the capacity that this administration has to try to take some of these tools that they view as enormous negotiating tactics vis-a-vis China and actually effectuate policy that implements against them. And I think that is a deep and unanswered question. And my hope for the summit, frankly, is I think that there are really difficult and challenging questions with respect to national security with vis-a-vis China, and also with respect to the future of artificial intelligence, where having this sort of approach that looks like it is in a state where we're trying to race to AGI is definitely an approach, but one that has a set of consequences that are tenuous for global security. And so I think that these are hard conversations, and frankly, I wish them well. I hope that they are able to have conversations that are meaningful with respect to ensuring American national security.
Well, and because of Trump's fumbles, Xi comes into the summit with the upper hand.